The Psychology of Freud and the Discovery of Female Desire. Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, spent much of his life exploring the unconscious mind, seeking to unravel the mysteries of human desire. His theories, especially those relating to female sexuality, remain some of the most controversial and compelling in the history of psychology. Freud's work on desire, repression, and the unconscious challenged conventional views of human nature and relationships, offering a framework that many modern men are still unaware of. At the heart of Freud's analysis is the idea that human desire is not governed by rational thought or morality. It is a primal force rooted deep within us, operating far beneath the surface of conscious awareness. For women, this desire is particularly elusive and contradictory. Freud's exploration of female sexuality revealed a truth that many still find difficult to accept. Women's desires are not always aligned with what they consciously claim to want. This is where Freud's understanding of repression becomes key. He believed that what society has deemed acceptable for women, family-oriented roles, and submission has led to a profound suppression of their true desires. Freud's theory of repression suggests that desire does not disappear when it is suppressed. Instead, it is distorted, pushed underground, and often re-emerges in unpredictable ways. For women, this repression has led to the formation of what Freud called a double life. On the surface, women present themselves as nurturing, polite, and modus-conforming to societal expectations of femininity. But deep within, there is a wild, untamed, and often dangerous yearning for something more, something that transcends societal norms. It is here, in the shadow of this suppressed desire, that the truth about female attraction begins to emerge. This is where Freud's insights become particularly relevant for modern men. Freud understood that female desire is not drawn to safety or comfort. Contrary to what many men believe, women are not seeking stability, security, or predictability in a relationship. Freud's writings show that women's desires are not primarily directed toward the reliable and consistent partner, but rather toward the one who offers them something more, elusive, something dangerous and uncertain. This is not to say that women want chaos for chaos's sake, but rather that they are drawn to the tension that comes from the absence of certainty. They want the thrill of the chase, the excitement that comes from pursuing something they cannot fully possess. It is the mystery, the challenge, that fuels their attraction. Consider the common scenarios that most men find themselves in. A woman says she wants a kind, attentive man, yet she finds herself obsessed with the one who disappears or plays hot and cold. She claims to seek stability, but her heart races for the man who lives on the edge, whose life is anything but predictable. This is not about malice or cruelty. It is about the primal forces of attraction that Freud uncovered. It is about the inherent tension between desire and denial, between what can be had and what remains out of reach. Freud's concept of the repetition compulsion comes into play here. He posited that people are often drawn to what wounds them, not to what heals them. Women, in this sense, are not seeking comfort, they are seeking emotional conflict. Because it is within conflict that they feel most alive, most engaged, most attracted. The key to understanding this lies in recognizing that women are not primarily seeking emotional safety. They are seeking emotional conflict because it is in the unresolved, the uncertain, and the unspoken that desire thrives. The man who makes himself too available, who pours out his emotions, who offers all his love without any hesitation, becomes predictable. He becomes the good guy, who is always there, always kind, always steady. And though these qualities may seem admirable, they often fail to spark genuine desire. The woman begins to lose interest, not because he is a bad man, but because his predictability has robbed her of the thrill of the chase. She becomes bored, and in boredom, attraction fades. Freud understood this deeply. He believed that women are not simply drawn to what is safe or comforting. They are drawn to what unsettles them, what challenges them, and what makes them feel the tension of uncertainty. It is in this uncertainty that desire is born. This is why, as much as women may claim to want stability, what they often crave is the very opposite. They crave the man who remains emotionally centered, who does not bend to their whims, who does not lose himself in their moods or emotions. They want the man who is not shaken by their silence, who does not chase them when they pull away. They want the man who can stand firm in his own sense of self and his own purpose, unaffected by their emotional storms. In this light, Freud's understanding of female desire is not just a critique of women, it is a revelation about the dynamics of attraction. Men who wish to understand women and to maintain the attraction in their relationships must first understand the fundamental nature of desire itself. Desire is not about giving everything, about making oneself emotionally available at all times. It is about withholding, about maintaining a sense of mystery, about resisting the temptation to always be there, always be available. Women, according to Freud, are drawn to men who retain their mystery, who are not constantly on display, who do not wear their hearts on their sleeves. The complexity of female desire and the role of tension. Freud's groundbreaking work on human desire, particularly in women, unveil the truth that is often overlooked in modern discourse. desire is not simply an emotional or rational force, but something far deeper and more complex, woven into the fabric of the unconscious mind. Freud's theories challenge the simplistic notion that love and attraction are solely about emotional connection and affection. For women, the intricacies of desire lie beyond affection, and much of it is rooted in tension, the psychological tension between attraction and resistance, between what is available and what remains out of reach. This tension is central to Freud's understanding of female desire. Women, according to Freud, are not primarily drawn to comfort, ease, or emotional availability. In fact, Freud believed that these traits commonly praised in ironically, the very things that extinguish desire. The tension that Freud speaks of is not negative in the traditional sense. Rather, it is the dynamic that ignites and sustains attraction. It is what causes desire to grow, to evolve, to remain elusive, and therefore powerful. Freud's insight was that attraction and love cannot exist without this fundamental tension, and once this tension is removed, when a partner becomes too predictable, too available, too willing, desire fades. When women enter into relationships, Freud would suggest they often bring with them a deep-seated desire for something that cannot be easily defined. This desire is shaped by evolutionary instincts, by years of cultural repression, and by an unconscious yearning for emotional conflict that challenges their own psychological boundaries. Women by nature are drawn to men who create that psychological conflict, the ones who are not easily. These men do not simply offer emotional reassurance and safety. They offer something more, something that stirs both the unconscious mind and the deepest recesses of a woman as emotional and sexual being. The traditional model of relationships often places the man in the role of a provider, someone who is expected to offer unwavering support, love, and consistency. But Freud, ever the skeptic of societal norms, suggests that this model misrepresents the underlying psychological needs of women. Women, rather than simply wanting a steady, reliable partner, crave the thrill of the chase, the excitement of uncertainty, and the emotional challenge that comes with a man who is not completely at her disposal. This emotional challenge is what creates the tension Freud deemed essential for desire. The woman who is drawn to the man who plays hard to get, who does not answer her calls immediately, or who is not emotionally available at every turn, is responding not to cruelty or games, but to the fundamental psychological principle that underlies attraction tension. The attraction is not toward a man who offers every part of himself in a transparent, unguarded way, but toward the man who maintains his mystery, who holds parts of himself back, who leaves her wanting more. The tension between what is given and what is withheld is the very essence of attraction, according to Freud. Freud understood that this dynamic, this need for emotional challenge, was not just about a woman's desire for excitement. It was in many ways about survival, about testing the stability of the man she would potentially commit to. Freud proposed that women, shaped by evolutionary pressures, have an instinctual need to test their partners, to see whether they can endure emotional turmoil without breaking. This is not an intentional game, but rather an unconscious process driven by the need for security in relationships. A man who can withstand this emotional chaos without faltering, without succumbing to neediness or insecurity, becomes the man who commands respect and desire. The paradox, as Freud noted, is that this tension, this resistance to emotional dependency, is not born out of cruelty or malice. It is simply the result of the deep psychological structures that drive female desire. Women are not inherently cruel or manipulative, as some might believe. Instead, they are driven by an unconscious need to test the strength of their partners. And it is in this testing, this push and pull, that real desire is formed. For men, the lesson here is profound. Too often, men fall into the trap of trying to be everything their partner desires: emotionally available, dependable, loving at all times. While these qualities are important, they alone are not enough to sustain attraction. To truly capture a woman's desire, a man must learn to maintain his own psychological sovereignty. He must learn to withhold not out of spite or manipulation, but as a way of preserving his own sense of self and purpose. When a man can stand firm in his own boundaries, when he can resist the impulse to always give in to her emotional needs, he becomes more attractive, more magnetic. Freud's teachings show that female desire is not just a function of emotional connection or physical attraction. It is about the tension between those elements. It is about the delicate dance between giving and withholding, between closeness and distance, between emotional vulnerability and psychological strength. The man who understands this dynamic can navigate relationships in a way that keeps desire alive. A man who does not fear withholding or creating uncertainty, but understands that in doing so, he makes himself irresistible. The mistakes men make and the illusions they live by. Freud's theories offer an unsettling but enlightening perspective on female desire, one that shakes the foundation of many modern beliefs about relationships. Men today, especially those influenced by contemporary ideas of emotional availability and transparency, often fall into the trap of misunderstanding these dynamics. They believe that love, attraction, and loyalty are earned through constant availability, emotional openness, and unflinching devotion. Unfortunately, This is a misinterpretation of female desire, and it leads many men to make the same mistakes over and over again. One of the most common mistakes men make in relationships is the belief that women want their constant attention and emotional availability. They think that by being the nice guy who is always there, offering emotional support at every turn, they will secure the loyalty of their partner. The problem, as Freud would argue, is that this behavior removes the very tension that fuels desire. When a man is constantly available, constantly willing to please, he becomes predictable, and predictability, Freud understood, is the killer of attraction. Imagine a man who continually reassures his partner, listens attentively to her every complaint, and caters to her every emotional need. On the surface, he appears to be the ideal partner, the one who is emotionally in tune, always there when needed. But over time, his unwavering devotion and attentiveness may cause the woman to lose interest. Freud's theory of repetition compulsion explains why this happens. Women, according to Freud, are not drawn to what is predictable and comforting. They are drawn to the uncertainty, the emotional challenge, and the tension that exists when a man withholds emotional validation. Freud believed that emotional conflict, not reassurance, is what keeps desire alive. When a man makes himself too emotionally available, when he pours his heart out and constantly seeks reassurance, he loses the psychological distance that allows the woman to feel the intensity of attraction. In essence, he becomes a source of emotional comfort rather than a source of tension, and in doing so, he becomes less desirable. This is the paradox of attraction. The more a man gives emotionally, the less emotionally powerful he becomes. This dynamic is often hard for men to understand because it goes against the grain of everything they have been taught about relationships. They are told that love is about being there for their partner, about offering emotional availability and openness. They are encouraged to open up and share their feelings, in the hope that their emotional vulnerability will lead to greater intimacy and affection. But Freud's teachings suggest that this is precisely what diminishes attraction. Vulnerability in this context does not foster a deeper connection, the emotional tension that makes attraction feel alive. Another common mistake men make is the belief that they must constantly prove their worth to their partner. This is a reflection of the deep insecurity that many men feel in their relationships. The more insecure a man is, the more he seeks external validation, particularly from his partner. He believes that by constantly proving himself, by showing his dedication and emotional depth, he will earn her admiration and loyalty. However, this desire for validation is rooted in neediness, and neediness, Freud would argue, is a form of emotional weakness that destroys attraction. Men who seek validation in this way often find themselves in a perpetual state of anxiety, constantly worried about whether their partner is satisfied, whether they are doing enough, or whether their love is reciprocated. This anxiety causes them to overextend themselves emotionally, to overcompensate for their perceived inadequacies, and to neglect their own sense of self. In doing so, they relinquish their psychological sovereignty, the very quality that makes them attractive in the first place. Freud's understanding of female desire challenges men to examine this dynamic closely. He argued that women are not drawn to men who are emotionally needy or who seek constant validation. Instead, they are attracted to the man who is emotionally the one who does not need his partner to validate his worth. It is this emotional independence, this ability to stand firm in his own sense of self, that makes a man attractive. When a man no longer seeks validation, when he no longer feels the need to prove his worth, he becomes an enigmatic figure, someone who commands respect and intrigue. Freud's concept of anatomy as destiny also plays a significant role in understanding the psychological dynamics at work in relationships. He argued that deep-seated sexual instincts and primal drives shape the desires that men and women experience before they even think about them. These desires are not influenced by societal norms or personal aspirations. They are rooted in the unconscious mind, in instincts and drives that are shaped by evolution. For women, these instincts often lead them to seek out men who embody strength, resilience, and psychological sovereignty. The bad boy archetype, which has remained enduringly popular in literature, film, and real life, represents a man who is not emotionally dependent, who stands apart from societal norms, and who remains impervious to emotional manipulation. This is why women are often drawn to men who seem unattainable, unpredictable, or emotionally distant. Freud understood that women's desires are not driven by a longing for safety or comfort. Rather, they are driven by a deeper, unconscious need for emotional tension and psychological challenge. The idea of the bad boy is not a call to engage in reckless or destructive behavior. Rather, it is a representation of a deeper psychological truth. Women are not simply drawn to nice men, but to men who retain their emotional independence and psychological strength. This is the core of Freud's understanding of desire. A man who is emotionally detached, who does not need his partner to complete him, is the man who remains intriguing and desirable. Men must understand that attraction is not about giving everything to their partner, nor is it about seeking validation or approval. Attraction is about maintaining an air of mystery, withholding emotional validation at times, and standing firm in one's own sense of purpose. When men relinquish this sense of psychological strength, when they submit to emotional neediness or become too emotionally available, they lose the very qualities that make them desirable. The illusions of emotional neediness and the power of self-control. One of the most powerful illusions men live by today is the belief that emotional neediness or excessive vulnerability will foster closeness and attract loyalty. This is perhaps one of the most deeply ingrained ideas in contemporary dating and relationship advice. Yet it contradicts the principles Freud laid out about desire. Freud's exploration of the unconscious mind reveals that women, although they may outwardly express a desire for emotional closeness, are actually drawn to something much deeper. Psychological power, emotional sovereignty, and crucially the man who does not give in to emotional dependence. Emotional neediness manifests when a man constantly seeks approval or reassurance from his partner. This behavior may stem from a desire to be loved, to feel validated, or to prove one's worth, but in reality, it pushes women away. Freud believed that female desire is rooted in the unconscious, which operates according to instincts and emotional drives that are often at odds with what is considered socially acceptable. The more a man seeks to satisfy a woman's emotional needs through endless reassurance, attention, or validation, the more he loses the very qualities that make him attractive. Neediness, from Freud's perspective, reflects a lack of emotional sovereignty. It is a sign of dependence, not strength. Women, Freud argued, are not drawn to emotional dependence. They are drawn to a man who can stand firm in his own identity, who can remain emotionally unshaken in the face of challenges, and who does not rely on the approval of others to feel secure in himself. This emotional strength, according to Freud, is what creates the psychological tension that fuels attraction. Furthermore, the idea of emotional neediness goes hand in hand with the concept of emotional chasing, which often plays out in relationships where the man is constantly trying to win his partner's affection by being available, vulnerable, and accommodating. This behavior, while seemingly harmless, actually reduces the tension that Freud identified as the core of desire. A man who constantly chases his partner, seeking her approval or affection, may initially appear loving, but over time, this dynamic shifts the power in the relationship. The man becomes the one who is always giving, always chasing, and ultimately, always in a state of emotional submission. The more a man submits to emotional neediness, the more he unknowingly reinforces a sense of dependency. Freud's view on desire emphasizes that women are not seeking emotional submission from their partners, they are seeking emotional strength. They are drawn to men who do not emotionally rely on them, who remain steadfast in their purpose and direction, regardless of the emotional shifts in the relationship. When a man stops chasing, when he stops trying to prove himself through emotional availability, he begins to establish an aura of strength and confidence that naturally draws a woman's attention. The key here is emotional self. Freud understood that desire is not about excessive emotional outpouring or vulnerability. It is about restraint. A man who exercises emotional self-control, who knows when to give and when to withhold, who maintains a sense of mystery, and who remains focused on his own goals becomes a more attractive partner. Emotional self-control creates a balance of tension where the woman feels intrigued, challenged, and ultimately drawn to it. In this way, desire becomes a dynamic dance between emotional openness and emotional restraint. The man who masters this dance becomes an emotional force that women can't help but be attracted to. How men can apply Freud's insights to navigate relationships and maintain desire. Freud's exploration of human desire, especially his understanding of female attraction, offers profound insights for modern men, yet many continue to misunderstand the dynamics of relationships. These misunderstandings often lead to failed connections and emotional frustration. The true challenge, however, lies in applying Freud's theories in real-life situations, learning to create and sustain the very emotional tension that he believed is necessary for desire to thrive. In this part, we will explore how men can begin to embrace Freud's ideas in their own relationships. It is about understanding not only what makes them desirable, but also how they can maintain a dynamic that keeps attraction alive, even through the inevitable challenges that come with love, intimacy, and emotional connection. Applying these principles can transform how men experience and approach relationships, enabling them to remain emotionally sovereign, desirable, and centered in their purpose. 1. Embrace emotional independence. Stop seeking validation. The first step in applying Freud's insights is for men to stop seeking external emotional validation from their partners. Freud's theory of emotional independence challenges the idea that love can be earned by constantly reassuring a partner, offering emotional availability, or doing everything right. Instead, the most magnetic men are those who do not need constant validation, who have a deep sense of self-worth, and who maintain their emotional boundaries even within close relationships. By practicing emotional independence, men learn to maintain their sense of self, regardless of their partner's emotional state. This emotional autonomy creates an aura of mystery and strength, which, as Freud would argue, is essential for maintaining desire. Women are attracted to men who don't need them to feel complete, who don't bend or break in response to emotional pressure or insecurity. To develop this emotional independence, Men must first learn to value themselves beyond their relationship status or the approval of others. This means developing their own passions, goals, and pursuits, things that make them feel whole on their own. When a man has a full life outside of his relationship, when his identity is not defined solely by his role as a partner, he is far more attractive. His partner sees him as a whole person with a purpose, not just someone who exists to meet her emotional needs. 2. Master the art of withholding. The power of restraint. Freud's theory emphasized the importance of withholding, not in a malicious or manipulative sense, but as a way of maintaining mystery and tension. When a man is constantly emotionally available, when he gives his partner everything at once, he removes the mystery that is so vital for attraction. Instead of offering his attention and affection freely, a man must learn the art of withholding, of not being entirely available at all times. Withholding does not mean playing games or being emotionally distant for the sake of manipulation. It simply means exercising restraint. It means not always responding to texts immediately, not always being the first to initiate plans, and not always being the one to reassure or console. When a man withholds emotionally, he creates a sense of longing and curiosity in his partner. This dynamic, based on Freud's idea of tension, fuels attraction and keeps the emotional connection alive. Restraint is a powerful tool for sustaining desire. Freud's concept of the repetition compulsion suggests that women are often drawn to situations that emotionally challenge them. If a man is always emotionally available, always seeking her approval, he makes himself predictable. The lack of challenge kills attraction. But when a man withholds and maintains his emotional independence, he stirs that primal desire for the chase, for something just out of reach. 3. Stay centered in your purpose. Maintain psychological sovereignty. As most important insight about desire is that it is rooted in psychological sovereignty, the ability to remain steadfast in one's own purpose and direction, unaffected by the emotional turbulence of a partner. Men who understand their own purpose, who are driven by their own passions and ambitions, remain grounded in their sense of self, no matter what happens in their relationship. This sense of purpose is vital because it anchors a man's emotional state and gives him a sense of direction in life. Freud argued that desire thrives in tension, and a man who remains emotionally stable in the face of challenges creates the kind of uncertainty that fuels desire. Women are attracted to men who are not swayed by their moods, who do not panic when they pull away or become distant. The man who can walk away, who can say no without guilt or anger, becomes a more compelling partner because he embodies emotional strength and to maintain psychological sovereignty. Men must first identify their own goals and passions that exist outside of the relationship. They should have hobbies, careers, and personal goals that make them feel fulfilled, independent of their partner's emotional state. When a man's emotional and mental energy is focused on something other than the relationship, he becomes more attractive. His partner sees him as a complete individual, not someone who is emotionally dependent on her for validation or happiness. 4. Understand the role of conflict. Desire thrives in tension. Freud believed that desire cannot exist without conflict. It thrives in the space between emotional closeness and distance. For men, this means understanding that emotional challenges in relationships are not necessarily negative. Rather than avoiding conflict or emotional tension, men should embrace it as an essential part of maintaining desire. Conflict in relationships doesn't always mean fights or misunderstandings. It can also refer to emotional distance, the inevitable pullback that occurs when one partner needs space. Freud argued that this emotional ebb and flow creates the tension that fuels attraction. A woman's desire is not stoked by constant reassurance or emotional availability. It is stoked by the challenge of keeping a partner intrigued, by the excitement of uncertainty. Men must learn to embrace the natural push-pull dynamics of relationships, recognizing that tension is a necessary part of love and attraction. By remaining centered in their own purpose and not reacting emotionally to every shift in their relationship, men can maintain a powerful presence that creates lasting desire. They should never let emotional turbulence, whether it's caused by a partner's mood, silence, or withdrawal, shake their confidence or emotional state. The man who remains unaffected, who continues on his path regardless of the emotional chaos around him, is the one who commands desire. 5. Stop chasing. Let her come to you. One of the most powerful lessons from Freud's theories is that women are not attracted to men who constantly chase after them. The idea of chasing, whether it is through excessive emotional availability or desperate attempts to win affection, ultimately makes a man less attractive. Freud's work shows that women desire the man who remains focused on his own purpose, the one who does not need them to validate his worth. The key is to stop chasing emotional approval and instead become the kind of man who's fully engaged with his own life. This does not mean playing games or intentionally withdrawing to manipulate emotions, but rather recognizing that your life and your mission are paramount. When a man focuses on his own goals and remains emotionally independent, his partner is drawn to him by the very mystery and strength that he projects. A man who isn't chasing a woman's affection becomes intriguing, unpredictable, and emotionally magnetic. This dynamic creates a kind of attraction that is long-lasting and meaningful because it is based on mutual respect, emotional sovereignty, and the tension that desire thrives on.